On page 3 of our Intro to Illustrator notes, we're going to be talking about types of Bezier line segments. And everything that we create in Illustrator is either going to be a straight Bezier line segment or a curved Bezier line segment. And typically what we'll do is we'll use the pen tool to create everything that we go ahead and design as vector images in Illustrator. If we don't use the pen tool, get rid of that real quick. If we don't use the pen tool, which is right here, we will typically use our shape tools to get some sort of artwork. All right. And the pen tool is kind of the backbone of Illustrator. It is, again, how we create the majority of our artwork. So it's really important that we have a solid understanding of what it is, what it creates, and how to use it. So we're going to take a look at a straight Bezier line segment first. I'll identify A and B. And then the second thing is we will take a look at a curved Bezier line segment and identify C through F. You are going to identify A through F down here, again, at the top section of page 3 of our Intro to Illustrator notes. So let's go ahead and get started. With the pen tool, once I click on the artboard, it creates a little square. And this little square is going to be filled in this situation. And that square is called an anchor point, ANCHOR. And everything that we create in Illustrator is made up of anchor points that are connected by what we call Bezier lines. And that's this straight line here. When I click again on our artboard, it creates what we call another anchor point. All right. Notice that this one is filled in completely with red, and this one now is not filled in with red, but is filled in with white. There's a difference between this anchor point and this anchor point. The red anchor point is an anchor point that is active, which means we can make changes to it. And the white filled in anchor point is an unactive anchor point, which means we can't make any changes to it until it becomes active. So if I escape by pressing the escape key on my keyboard, and I come in with my direct selection tool and I click on my unactive anchor point, notice how I hover over it and it gets a little bit bigger. You can see that white fill a little bit easier. If I click on that unactive anchor point, now that unactive anchor point is now active. It's filled in with red. And the other one, the second one I made, is now the unactive anchor point. When you have an active anchor point, you can click and drag it and move it wherever you want. And let's say I want to move this one now. I would click on it and I would make it active and I can move it wherever I want. Okay. Now, this line here is what we call a Bezier line, and my anchor points are outlined or filled in with red. And that is because this little strip on layer 1 is red. Layer 1 is where this Bezier line is. So that is why that Bezier line is red. Now, if I open up my sublayers and I take this path and I move it on to layer 3, notice how my Bezier line now turns to that green color. So when we get into some of our advanced projects, you may want to eventually change this Bezier line color. Some of them are easier to see than others. How you would do that is double clicking kind of towards the right side of that layer, never on the layer name. Don't do that because then it'll just, if you double click on it, it'll let you change that layer name. So if you kind of click in this gray space off to the side, you're going to have an option to change layer name for 1, but 2, you can change the color of your Bezier line. So let's say I wanted it to be purple. If I didn't like the purple, I could change it to, the yellow is really hard to see, at least for my old eyes. I could change it to a blue, but whatever that little strip color is here is whatever color your Bezier line is going to go ahead and show up as. Now I can build off of this existing path, and I can keep clicking. And as I keep clicking, it's going to keep dropping anchor points. And why it keeps flashing white when I click is because my stroke color is white. So if I deselected this, my Bezier line doesn't actually stay there. It just shows up when my, in this case, path is active. And I can select my path. Again, that Bezier line is going to come up because my path is active. And I can always increase my stroke weight if I'm having a hard time seeing that. So we can either work with paths in Illustrator, or I can come back in with my pen tool. I can reactivate that end anchor point, and I can come back to my original anchor point that I started with, and I can close that path. And when I close a path, that's when we call that an object, and it allows me to fill that in. And what an object is it's a complete closed path. So everything in Illustrator is created up of paths and objects only, right? So that is how you go ahead and create a straight line. So as review for A and B on your note sheet, when I click once, that's called an anchor point, ANCHOR. When I click again, it creates another anchor point. But more importantly, the straight line between letter A and letter A is called a Bezier line, right? And Bezier is Bezier, and that's what B is. It's a straight Bezier line. So that's a little bit about a straight line segment. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a curved line segment. C, we already know the name of, so this is an unactive anchor point, but you can just write down anchor point for C. And D, even though it's curved, it's still called a Bezier line, Bezier, Bezier line. The main difference, besides it being curved from the straight, is our components E and F on our curved Bezier line. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to come back in with my pen tool, and I needed to deselect this straight Bezier line segment. So I came in with my selection tool. I just clicked off of that straight line segment. So it's deselected now. And then I'm coming back in and reselecting with my pen tool. Now, in order to create a curved Bezier line, I'm still going to click to create an anchor point, but I'm still holding down the left side of my mouse, and I'm going to drag. So I'm clicking and dragging, and what that's doing is it's creating the line for F, that straight line that stems from your anchor point to that little circle at the end. And F is called your control handle. All right, so F, going out of order a little bit, is called your control handle. And that is the straight line that runs from, again, your anchor point to the little circle that E is pointing to. Okay, so F is your control handle. E is the little circle, and the little circle is called your control point. Control point. All right. And then if I move my mouse now, you can see that I have a curved line going on. So once I click again, I'm still holding down my mouse, and I am going to drag. And from this anchor point as well, it's going to go ahead and create that straight control handle. And at the end of the handle, on either end, you're also going to have a control point. Now I escaped. I pressed the escape key on my top left-hand corner of my keyboard so that I could show you a few things. My direct selection tool is what I want to go ahead and talk about next. And your direct selection tool, if you click on your control point, you can control the size, the shape, the direction, and kind of the flow of how big, small, direction, width of your curve that you have. All right, now I accidentally deselected. I missed my control handle, so I clicked off of my line. But if I come and click on any part of that line, I can go ahead and reactivate it. All right, so these control points allow you, I'm going to click off of it again. I missed. These control points control the size, the shape, the direction of the curves that you're creating. Okay. So that is what our curved line segment is made up of. A control point, is E. F is your control handle. D is your curved Bezier line. If you just wrote Bezier line, that's totally fine too. And then C is also called an anchor point. So those are the backbones of what we are going to be creating in Illustrator, either straight lines or curved Bezier lines, typically using the pen tool, but sometimes we will be using our shape tools. In the next video, we'll be going over a discussion a little bit more in depth about the difference between the selection tool, direct selection tool, and then I'll review what the fill and the stroke color are.